Hi guys, welcome to my first watercolor mini course. I'm so excited you decided to join me here. You're probably here because you've wanted to learn how to paint with watercolors for a while and you just don't know where to start, or maybe you did start and you don't really know how to nail down the right techniques to get it to look really beautiful and start elevating your style a little more. So I'm going to go ahead and give you 3 basic mistakes that most starting out watercolor artists make and how to correct those, all while painting a cute saguaro cactus. So let's go ahead and get started. The most important mistake that most people make is they try painting without a lot of water, and what ends up happening is it looks really thick and more like acrylic than watercolor. So what you really want to do is get your brush really wet and really loosen up your color. And what I do, I blend in this giant palette and let my colors run together because I love the way it creates a bunch of unique colors. But I'm just going to be pulling from this green over here, which is green and brown together, so it's a little more neutral. And you can see how watery it is. Like, it runs back and forth if I tilt the tin. So what I do is I just pull from this color. It's a pretty neutral color, and if you test it on a test card like I'm doing, it should be pretty watery and run back and forth. So it has some movement going on, and that's really what we want in our watercolor. We don't want it to look really pasty and thick like right here, but if we're trying to get it darker, I'll show you what to do. So the first cactus I'm going to work on is a saguaro cactus. Now, I did sketch these on and beforehand and then just lightly erased them. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how I start to paint this. You don't have to sketch these on beforehand, but you can. All right, so I have kind of a neutral green. I just mixed up green, a pretty bright green, and some brown. And what I'm going to do for this one is I'm actually going to create lines that run down the cactus to give it that gridded look that a saguaro cactus has. So I'm going to start at the top, and I'm only going to use the point of my brush because we want it to be like little thin lines like this that kind of disconnect. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to take my brush, just the point of it, and run it down the side of the cactus. This is one side of the body of the cactus, like that. And then get some more water on my brush. Like I said, you want to go back to your water so many times in between using your paint. Otherwise, it's going to dry out. So this is really watery. You don't want yours to be thick and pasty, or it's going to look more like acrylic and less like watercolor. So number 1 tip is a very watery brush. You're not trying to make it all one color. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm just kind of lining the body of the cactus, which brings me to my second point, that most beginner watercolor artists tend to forget to leave white space. Now, it does depend on what style you're using. If you're trying to layer and make it really realistic, then you can omit some of your white space. But if you're not going to be layering a ton, you want to leave white space to kind of show where the highlights are and just show where different parts of the design are. All right, so now in order to make part of this a little bit darker, I'm going to take a little bit more of my brown in my green, and this time I'm using a little bit less water, so you can see my colors really watery around here. Take some brown and take a little green, and you can see this is like a really darkened version because it has more color and less water. So yes, we do want to have quite a bit of water, but when we want to add a little bit of darker layer, that's when it's okay to add a little bit less water. And because this is wet, it should run pretty nicely, but you can drop it in and see that it actually runs in the color really nicely. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to shadow the left side a little bit of my cactus, and just imagine that the sun is hitting it from the right, and it just kind of has this dark shadowed left side like that. Now we could start over with the more light green again, which if you kind of got rid of that color, again, you just use more water. It's the same thing as the dark green, but just more water added. So I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to actually create a few arms. And the arms on the saguaro are like little baby saguaro cacti. I always joke that it's like its own cactus that would go into the ground, but it just kind of connects in. So every arm is going to be its own little piece. Just like that. And I'm going to do one right here too. So I'm basically just doing the same thing, just kind of running the lines down every arm and making them their own kind of little cactus piece. And since they're all still wet because I used a lot of water, like I said, now I can come back in with my dark green that I used on the left side of the body, and I can use it on the left side of each arm. You want to imagine that each arm is its own individual piece, and that the light is hitting it individually. So the right side should be more light, but you don't want to overthink it, which brings me to my third point on mistakes most beginners make, which is overthinking the details. And you really just want to let the watercolor take on its own natural form. We're not trying to make it perfect here. We're just trying to create the idea of the cactus. Now I'm going to work on the left side, and you absolutely can use a smaller brush for the arms. I just tend to like the amount of water and weight that the bigger brushes carry. Just like that. Okay. So again, the 3 points that we are trying to cover is use more water, leave white space, and also layer in the color, right? So kind of leave white space and add more color to darken up the shadowed areas, and make sure not to overthink every detail. Otherwise, you'll keep going over the same area over and over, and at that point, you're kind of just ruining the work that you've done. You just kind of want to leave it simple and trust the process. I always wait to make changes until I've really stepped back from my work and looked at it. Believe it or not, a lot of times I look at something I'm painting even after all these years, and I don't like how it looks. And then when I step back, I realize that it's actually really cute. So it just takes a new perspective. Sometimes when you're really close to your artwork, you overanalyze it. All right, so that is our saguaro cactus.